started? Looks like it started.
Mr. Chairman, we're live.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Labor and Health this morning, Wednesday, March the 11th. Am I right? Okay, lucky guess. It's a bright, sunshiny, snowy morning outside. We have one bill before us this morning, Senate File 133, brought to us by Senator Salazar this morning. If you'd like to come take your seat of honor. I would preface our starting this meeting this morning with a couple of remarks, which I've been thinking about actually all morning that interrupted my exercise routine and everything. But that remark is, I love this committee because we hear up close and personal testimony. Sometimes we feel good about it and sometimes we feel bad about it. In this room, it's a little bit more impersonal than our old committee rooms when you literally lean back and would bump into one of the testimony bringers or lobbyist or anybody in the room. We were very close. But in the sense of being very personal topics, this committee hears very personal issues. There are issues that when we vote on them, they make a difference sometimes immediately to the public and to our constituents. And it's a little bit of a different feeling than voting on a bill about perhaps cryptocurrency or taxes, et cetera. These are things that touch home right away. If some legislation we pass may prevent a suicide, for instance, it would give you a good feeling, although you would never know that happened, but it's a good feeling. That being said, sometimes this committee also brings out very emotional sides of people, as we've heard a couple of times this year already. And in the past, at times, that emotional response has overflowed. And I think this committee and other committees as well have done very well keeping that in a civil realm and keeping the comments and the testimony. And I would ask the testimony bringers today, as well as the committee and all the public, to keep this conversation as civil as we can. It happens that this very topic is one of the low points in my legislative career. For the first time last year, I received a death threat from one of my votes, and that's truly not acceptable. It happens, and it'll probably happen again. But I would remind everyone that we can disagree and we can agree to disagree in here, but we need to keep it civil and understand that everybody has opinions, and every one of these bills touches somebody emotionally, and we keep it in this room, we keep it civil and have a responsible discourse. All that being said, now I can exercise tomorrow without all those thoughts on my mind. Let's move forward with this bill. This is Senate File 133, prohibiting abortifacients and chemical abortions. Let's have a roll call, please, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Bouchard? Here. Senator Furphy? Here. Senator Hutchins? Here. Senator McKeown?
Here.
Chairman Baldwin?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Prohibiting abortifacients and chemical abortions. Senator Salazar, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. So as the good chairman said, this is a bill, Senate File 133, prohibiting abortifacients and chemical abortions. It's a 3-page bill. It's very simple, but it is a policy decision by you. And the short of this bill is simple, that this bill prohibits the use of certain chemicals for abortion. And I will go through it. Page 1, an act relating to abortions prohibiting abortifacient drugs for abortions as specified. If you go down further to line 14, notwithstanding any of these provisions of the law, no person shall manufacture, distribute, prescribe, dispense, sell, transfer, or use of any of these abortifacient drugs in the state for the purpose of procuring or performing an abortion. I would ask the committee to take a look at line 11, line 10. This does not deal with contraception. These drugs that are used for contraceptive purposes under this law would still be available. The sole intent is line 2, for the purpose of procuring or performing an abortion. Look at it. I will draw your attention to line 15 on page 2. Any physician or other person who violates this subsection is guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment for not more than 14 years and a fine not to exceed $10,000. Finally, on page 3, we have simple definitions of what is pregnancy and what is abortifacient drugs. And there, between line 11 and 14, are the specific drugs that are used for the termination of a life, in my opinion. Let me just make a couple comments, Mr. Chairman. It's pretty clear cut, and I want to give room for others to testify. Throughout this country, even in our own state, we have public policy on what we as a society are going to allow within the framework of the right to have an abortion in this country. In some parts of the country, partial birth abortions are not allowed because either the state or the federal government in instances has said that that is something that we will not allow. I believe that we as a state in Wyoming have a responsibility to also decide not only what we will and will not allow in the procedures of how you have an abortion, but also what procedures are either dangerous or gruesome. For the child, which I believe is a human life in that womb, chemical abortion is, in my opinion, a barbaric death sentence carried out in chemically induced starvation. I would refer you even to the issue of the death penalty, where we are trying to take a human life because of a punishment, which is in no way in this instance the same, but we have a rule of cruel and unusual. I believe that these chemical abortions are cruel and unusual. I believe that they are barbaric. They induce starvation. I believe that Wyoming is a pro-life state. You good members have seen throughout even the short period that we've had our Senate, our legislative session, we've talked about the homicide of the unborn child. We've talked about born alive. All that these bills are going forward because they have the support not only of the majority of the legislature, but I believe the majority of the people of Wyoming. So at the end of the day, Mr. Chairman and members, it's simply a clear-cut decision. If you believe that the life in the womb is a human being, then this type of what I believe to be barbaric way of aborting a child is not in the standards that we want to have in our state, then I would ask that you vote for this bill. And quite frankly, if you don't believe that child in the womb is a human life, I don't know why you would vote for this bill. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions, committee? Anyone? Senator Hutchins, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Salazar, just to make it very clear, you are not taking a whole list of abortifacients and saying, we're removing those from our laws. We are no longer going to be allowed to use those. From what I can gather in your bill, you have 4 distinct drugs that you say are cruel and unusual. Is that correct, Mr.
That's
or
correct.
Senator?
Only those 4 that are mentioned in the bill are those drugs which are used in the act of chemical abortion. That is it. It's a very narrow bill.
Senator Salazar, you win extra points in this committee.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
If you address the chairman, number 2, if you can pronounce correctly all those drugs.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. And no, I cannot pronounce
Okay,
all
no
those
extra points
drugs.
for you. Follow up, Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned that they induce starvation. Are there any other things that these drugs do that would be beneficial for us to know about?
Not to my knowledge. Again, I put in the provisions on line 10, obviously the exception of the use of contraceptions. So I'm not a physician, but if these medicines, if these chemicals on page 3 are used or even partially used within the use of contraception, they are allowable under this bill. The intent is if they are used for the specific purpose of chemical abortion.
Follow up, Senator Hutchins.
Yes, my last question, Mr. Chairman. So with that in mind and our oath to uphold the U.S. and Wyoming Constitution's Article 1, Section 14 deals with bail, cruel and unusual punishment. It mentions in the last sentence, let me see, let's put it this way. Excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor shall cruel and unusual punishment be inflicted. And I would say not only for a criminal, but we're saying for that live person inside the womb. Is that correct, Senator Salazar?
Senator
Mr.
Salazar,
Chairman.
go ahead.
Senator Hutchins, that is absolutely correct.
Thank
The
you.
only difference I would say is that, in my opinion, the criminal that's being punished had committed a crime. The living being in the womb had not.
Further questions, committee? I've got a couple. You're not off
Yes,
the hook.
yes, Mr. Chairman.
Page 2, line 12 and 13, and you may not be able to supply this answer. I'm sure somebody will testify that can, but before pregnancy can be confirmed through conventional medical testing. Do you know the dates, how quickly the pregnancy can be determined through medical testing?
I do not. Maybe the chairman would know.
I am, but I'm actually going to allow some of the people that testify will probably fill us in on that. And
Very
give us
good,
some more
Mr. Chairman.
because I'm not an expert on it. I have an idea, but. And the second question would be for you. These drugs, at least one of these drugs is used in, and this is a misnomer, and we've heard this on this committee before, the difference between the medical term for abortion, miscarriage is a common term that you hear in the public. Miscarriage in medical terminology is called a spontaneous or a missed abortion, a kind of abortion. That's medical terminology. My question is if one of these drugs is used in a spontaneous abortion to complete abortion and incomplete abortion, is that outlawed by this bill as well?
My understanding would be no, but I would leave it to the experts on that, Mr. Chairman. So.
Thank you, Senator Salazar. Senator Hutchins, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as you were speaking, I looked up above on page 2, line 1 and 2. We see that these drugs are, the prohibition would be for the purpose of procuring or performing an abortion. So if these drugs were used for some other means, my understanding, and you can help me, Senator Salazar, would be that those are what we're talking about here, not the miscarriage. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that is my understanding. And that was my intent because I wanted this a specifically narrow. And so I would not have put my name on this bill if that was the intent of this bill. So.
Very good. Thank you. No further questions. We'll allow you to have a seat in the
Thank you,
audience, but don't
thank
go
you.
far. Public members in the room that would like to testify on the bill, go ahead, sir. Step up. We'll go front row to back row today. It's like being in church. When you're in the front row, you're going to get noticed first. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike Lehman. I'm representing the Catholic Diocese of Cheyenne. With these challenging topics, I think it's helpful to try to hold some space open for one another. For those who are against abortion restrictions, we must hear their concerns. That generally speaking, they're worried about individual rights and freedoms. They're worried about the long arm of government interfering in the personal lives of others. To the extent that the discussion remains in that context, we wholeheartedly agree with them. And we need to continually acknowledge this concern because we can certainly relate to it. I sent the committee this morning a 4D image of an unborn child, not to try to be smart in any way, but as a reminder that for us, the context expands beyond individual freedoms because it involves another life. None of our individual rights and freedoms are absolute because they're balanced by the common good of others.
Mm.
And we would ask others to hold this space for us. As we talk about the rights and freedoms of every individual, we cannot unsee what science and technology have revealed. Now we speak of life as sacred. And this often raises some eyebrows because it has a religious tone to it. Now, obviously this morning, I don't speak for every pro-lifer, but I can assure you, we are not here to impose our religious beliefs on anyone. When we look at that image, we don't see a Catholic or a Protestant child. We don't see a Jewish or a Muslim child, or an agnostic or an atheist child. We don't see a Democrat or a Republican. We see a vulnerable living human being. And knowing what an abortion intends to do, we wonder, what are the criteria for legal protection of human rights in America? If being alive and being human are not enough, what are the qualifiers? It's in the best interest of every security-seeking American to know the answer to that question. And it is the responsibility of our legislators to answer it. What qualifies for full legal protection of the law? And who gets to establish that criteria? Until these questions are answered, all of our other rights protected in the law are set upon a shaky foundation. This particular bill seeks to provide partial legal protections by outlawing medical abortions. Mr. Chairman, I mentioned to the committee before that we are also in full opposition to the death penalty. The fact that states have found more humane ways to kill prisoners does not change the fact that in the end, it is taking a human life. In this case, medication abortions take the unborn child earlier in development, but it still leads to the same end. Mr. Chairman, either life is sacred or it's not. Either it's a non-negotiable right in every single case, or we set ourselves up as the arbiters for who has the right to live and who does not. When we say that a single life is negotiable, and the arbiters are those who happen to be a little stronger or have a little louder voice, or the arbiters are the agents of the state using a quote unquote tool in the toolbox. We tell our children that we really believe that life is not sacred at all. It is negotiable. And only those with negotiating power can enjoy a sense of security and peace. Mr. Chairman, thank you for this opportunity, and I would stand for any questions.
Questions from Mr. Lehman Committee? Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you for coming to committee. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We get to see you often and we appreciate it. Other members from the audience, Representative, you sit close to the front row, not quite on the front row, but close enough. We got you.
Thank you, Chairman, Senators. This is has been a growing, almost like a plague.
Representative, can I get you just to put your name on the record so we know who you are? We know who you are, but those people out there don't know.
Representative Bill Fortner, House District 52, Campbell County, Wyoming. Thank you again for letting me speak. The abortion has got out of control. It's grown like a plague. And I've approached our chairman, Republican chairman in the county, on the same issue. There's so many issues that's coming to the front to be legislated on, and I have to look at the whole issue from a 3,000-foot view. And what I see is we got church communities out there that's growing leaps and bounds. Every year they're almost doubling. But these problems, alcoholism, suicide, abortions, numerous other ones, keep going, setting new records, new bars. And so my belief is we got a church system out there that's been exempt from taxes for that reason, to get the word out so they can have money for literature, that kind of stuff. And it hasn't been happening. And I've asked them at our local level, why hasn't this been happening? And they said, well, we realized this, that it's been a failure. And so I think, you know, not only is it important to bring it in front of this body, I think it's important to actually make a national move on it. You know, if they're not going to really go out and do what they're getting exempted to do, maybe we at a national level, we need to set a bar that sort of says, hey, you guys hit the road, get out on the pavement and make a difference. You're getting exempt for that. You darn sure should be able to perform to a standard that you can make a difference, because that's where it's all breaking down, is in the communication side of it. When you start giving drug addicts more drugs in states in the West to try to cure the problem, that's not curing nothing. That's just prolonging the problem. Saying we endorse what you're doing, let's just put a Band-Aid on it. But in my opinion, you know, and they say I'm not a Christian, I'm just a believer. But that's what Jesus Christ was looking for. He was looking for believers. And I want to tell you, this could all be fixed from within if our church groups would hit the road and get out there and take care of business. I'm 100% for this bill and these other bills that are all in line with this kind of stuff, because right now we got to do everything we can until these guys get up and running. But I think there should be some performance standards on the church exemption, the 501(c)(3). At every level. I think it should be at the county, the state, and the city levels, the federal level. I think we need to be looking more at that than going to the doctor, fixing the issues, psychiatrists, and all that kind of stuff. That's my opinion. That's where I stand on it. Thank you very much. Any
Thank you
questions?
very much. Somebody might have a question. Don't run away.
Okay.
Senator Hutchins, nope. No questions. Okay, you're off the hook today, Representative. Don't
Thanks
count
again.
on it every time. Thank you for coming. Okay, back row. We have anyone back there? Come on up, ma'am. Go ahead and introduce yourself and talk freely.
There we go. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today on this important bill. I'm Sharon Breitweiser. I am with NARAL Pro-Choice Wyoming. We do have, I believe, a number of doctors that have signed up to testify by Zoom, who I will defer to some extent to address any medical questions you have concerning mechanism of action and those more technical details. I also, Mr. Chairman, have mentioned to the Secretary, we have one doctor who has to see patients at 9 o'clock, and it doesn't look to me as if we're going to run into any time issues, but I wanted to ask your indulgence in perhaps letting her in on Zoom if there are a lot of people. That's Dr. Noyes, Noyes. So just briefly, as the bringer of the bill mentioned, it is a policy decision on your part. I would point out that obviously we are opposed to this bill. It would pose a direct challenge to the Roe versus Wade decision, which is perhaps the intent of the bill. Any other laws like this have been struck down. There are none of them in effect right now. There's one state, I believe, that has a bill that has been permanently enjoined. The decision under Roe v. Wade specifically said that states cannot regulate abortion within the first trimester, that there is a right to privacy for the woman to obtain that procedure. This particular medication abortion was declared safe and legal by the Food and Drug Administration 20 years ago. It's been used for 20 years safely. If you were to pass this bill and it were to go into effect, as you may know, it would pretty much eliminate every single abortion in Wyoming. These abortions are done up to 10 weeks. The doctors in Wyoming right now who are performing abortions, it's my understanding, are, I'd say, at least 99% using this safe early medication abortion as opposed to a surgical option. So again, if this is intended to be a challenge to Roe v. Wade, along with some of the other bills that have been filed this year, and that's your will, I certainly hope that you won't go down that path and take more of the Senate's time debating a bill. I mean, we have not gotten so insofar as discussing a legal challenge. And I know from listening to the legislature for many years, sometimes that's not a concern because it is a policy statement someone wants to make, and the constitutionality or the legal expenses to the state to potentially defend a difficult and problematic bill aren't a concern. But I would just like to mention that as well. So thank you all so much for your time and consideration, and look forward to working with you throughout the session.
Thank you. Questions coming in? Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I've been on this committee for, this is going on my 5th year, and I've seen a definite shift here in that we used to be told that there weren't any abortions being done. And what I just heard you say was that this is being used often. So I would like to know if you can give me that number of how many times this is used as a procedure.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, thank you. We have never on our end said that abortions aren't being done. I know there's been a lot of confusion and discussion for many years in terms of the numbers and the reporting. There's Guttmacher data that indicate the number of abortions. And again, we may have providers on the Zoom, I'm not sure. The numbers, there's always a lag in reporting. There's a lag in reporting to Guttmacher. I know the state's collecting numbers. There was a report to the Joint Labor Health Committee back in November on the abortions that had been reported to date under the new reporting law. Don't quote me on this, but I would say probably between 70 and 100 a year are being done in Wyoming, and almost all of those by medication abortion. But that's not a firm figure. That's my best estimate based on some of the reports I've read recently.
Further questions, committee? No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to committee. I see we have another senator that walked in. Would you like to testify, Senator? Chicken. Are there further comments from the back row? No shaking heads. Let's go to Zoom land then. Let's let Dr. Noyes in first so she can get to her patients, if we please could, Amanda.
Mr. Chairman, she's in the room.
Very good. Dr. Noyes, ready. We can see you and we can hear you. And we appreciate you coming when you're seeing. I tried to do a Zoom meeting, a committee meeting while I was seeing patients, and it didn't work out. I couldn't remember when to take my mask off. I wanted to put it on. Go ahead, Dr. Noyes.
Good morning, Chairman Baldwin. My name is Katie Noyes. I'm a family physician and I live in Jackson, Wyoming. I've been practicing medicine for 8 years. Most of my patients, I serve Teton County, Sublette County, and Lincoln County. I do also have patients that live in Park County, Sweetwater County, and Fremont County. And essentially, I am here today to speak against this bill, against 133. And I have a couple of different reasons why. I'm not going to belabor the fact that it's unconstitutional because Sharon has already discussed that. My second point is that this is not going to reduce the incidence of abortion. I think that we can all agree that fewer abortions, fewer desired abortions is a good thing. And unfortunately, restrictions on abortion have not been shown to reduce demand. Essentially, what this bill will do is harm Wyoming women by forcing them to travel further, pay more, lose more work in order to obtain a desired abortion. So just a brief patient story, a 40-year-old woman, mother of 2 young kids under 5, full-time worker. Her husband had recently had a vasectomy and his doctor had given the couple the go-ahead to have sex without concerns about a pregnancy. Well, a month later, she ends up in my office, very tearful, pregnant, and frustrated that she was in this position and had to make this decision for herself. Ultimately, they decided to end the pregnancy. She was able to obtain a medication abortion locally. She was able to come for a follow-up visit with a local provider. She was able to get an IUD placed at that very same visit, such that she was protected until they worked out what had happened with the vasectomy. And she was very thankful that she had compassionate care close to home. Now, what this bill does, this bill will not prevent this woman from having an abortion in the future. Essentially, what it does is force her to travel to Colorado, Utah, Montana to obtain a desired abortion. This has an economic impact in the form of missed work, lost wages, the cost of transportation, the cost of childcare. In a rural state, this disproportionately affects women in more rural areas, as well as poorer women who don't have these resources to use. Most of the women in Wyoming already travel to other states to obtain a desired abortion. As most of you already know, abortions are only available in Teton County, and the western half of the state travels here to obtain them. This is a very safe procedure. It's a very effective procedure. All of the medications that are used are FDA approved. The medications themselves cannot be banned. They have many other uses outside of abortion. So I really think that, in terms of supporting Wyoming women, supporting Wyoming citizens, we need to send them the message that they are capable of making their own healthcare decisions. This is a clear example of government interference in a very private, personal healthcare decision. And I know Wyoming senators can get behind that. And I think to reduce abortions in the future, we really need to be focusing our time on education, public health, access to contraception, as opposed to spending time and money trying to pass bills that are clearly unconstitutional and will ultimately harm Wyoming women. I'm happy to answer any medical questions. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Dr. Noyes, since you are first to testify, I'm going to throw the question at you since I didn't want to be the expert today. And that is on the bill. And I'm sure you don't have a copy of the bill. Is at what age or what time during the pregnancy can it be confirmed during conventional medical testing?
At what age can a pregnancy be confirmed?
Exactly. At what point can we detect and say, yes, you're pregnant?
So on a home pregnancy test, a home urine pregnancy test, the earliest that someone can usually pick that up is 4 weeks of gestation. The earliest that we can confirm on an ultrasound that there's a viable pregnancy is usually between 5 and 6 weeks.
Okay, thank you for that answer. That meant you the expert today. I'm just a questions committee. Senator Hutchins, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Noyes, for your testimony. I was just wondering, I'm going to give you a list of questions if you don't mind. Did you read the bill?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see that the bill is just trying to eliminate or ban the use of 4 particular drugs?
Yeah, actually, the bill lists 4 different drugs. There's only 2. It's just the difference between a generic and a brand name.
That makes it even better. Thank you, Dr. Noyes. And you talked about travel. Why would you have to travel to another state to get any of the other abortifacients that are not listed in this bill?
I'm not sure I understand the question because the only
I'll repeat it.
Let's make sure this goes through the chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll repeat the question. What would make a woman have to travel to another state to purchase or have prescribed to her another abortifacient drug that is on the list?
Okay.
Not on the list that we're trying to ban, but the list of abortifacients that are available.
Go ahead, Dr.
Thank you,
Noyes.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Dr.
So in my medical training, the only abortifacients that are used are mifepristone and misoprostol. and those are on the list.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Noyes, when I went online, I found several drugs. And you're saying in Wyoming, there's only 2?
Dr. Noyes.
Chairman Baldwin and Senator, there may be different names that brand versus generic, different manufacturers, but in the medical world, there are only 2 that we use, mifepristone and misoprostol, and they have other uses other than abortion. What you may be seeing online, I'm not aware of.
Okay.
Or there are herbal remedies, herbal drugs, other things that women try that are not necessarily medically sanctioned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I'm going to have a follow-up if that's okay.
Follow up, go ahead.
One of the things I continually hear is what this bill is trying to do is unconstitutional. And I look at Roe v. Wade as an opinion, not a law. And I think we've taken that as this is the law. Opinions can be changed, laws can be changed. One of the things this bill is really concerned about that we as legislators it is our duty to do is to try to protect life and protect life, especially if someone who's innocent of any crime. So this bill is really important. I don't believe it's trying to stop abortions. So one of the things I was going to ask you is where in the Constitution do you find that this type of abortion or any type of abortion is something that our US or Wyoming Constitution agrees to?
Dr. Noy.
So Senator Baldwin, this bill is trying to stop abortions. It is a ban on medication abortions. And you're right, there is no law in the US Constitution that says we have, this particular right, but we do have Roe v. Wade as precedent. And every state in this country that has tried to ban medication abortion, the courts have deemed that that is unconstitutional. There's one state in the country, Oklahoma, where a similar ban has passed and is permanently enjoined and is not in effect. This essentially bans almost all abortion in Wyoming. And I would really focus on let's protect the Wyoming women that we can see and hear and can tell their stories. Let's protect their existing children and their existing families. I don't know if you've heard of the Turnaway study, but there is good evidence to say that when you look at women 5 years after either being turned away or being able to obtain abortions, the women who were turned away for a variety of reasons, often because they were beyond a gestational age limit, have a higher poverty rate, a higher unemployment rate, a higher rate of being tethered to abusive partners, and less forward thinking about their agency over their life and their ability to do what they would like. So banning abortions, turning people away, does not help people. This will simply make it harder and more expensive to obtain them.
Thank you, Dr. Noy. Any further questions? Committee Senator McEwen. McEwen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've read quite a few studies on women that have obtained abortions, and there's many negative effects out of that down the road. Do you care to speak on that, ma'am?
Go ahead, Dr. Noy.
So yeah, there's a lot of people out there that are going to claim that this has negative effects. Does it cause more depression? Does it cause more regret? And there are exceptions, but in sort of the most comprehensive study that it has been done recently, 95% of women who chose to have an abortion felt like it was the right decision for them and still felt that 5 years later. So there's going to be a few percent who do regret their decision. And life is gray, life is messy. It's not black and white. But for the vast majority of women and their families, this is going to benefit them if this is what they want, as well as their existing family.
Thank you, Dr. Noy. Any further questions? Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming to testify today. My question is, you say you can detect pregnancy after 5 weeks. What term during the pregnancy would you issue these medications to perform an abortion? Basically, what I'm after is the age of the fetus that you would still prescribe these medications for.
Dr. Noy.
So, yeah. So Chairman Baldwin and Senator Furphy, medication abortion is approved to up to 10 weeks gestation. So between 5 and 10 weeks gestation is when these medications can be used.
Dr. Noy. Follow up. Go ahead, Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, that helps me a lot. Yeah, it helps me to understand this. Have you read any studies what these chemicals could do to a fetus up to 10 weeks in age? Thank you.
Go ahead, Dr. Noy.
So the mechanism of action of mifepristone is a progesterone blocker. Progesterone is a hormone that is used to support pregnancy. Hence, the pregnancy usually cannot be supported after the medication has been given. So the fetus is, in many cases, not viable after the medication is given.
Thank you, Dr. Noy. No further questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Noy, for taking time out of your schedule. Oh, hold on. We got one more question. You're not quite off the hook. Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question, doctor, is that what I've read is that you use the drugs in 2 steps.
Mhm.
And then what I've read is that it actually kills the fetus. So can you clarify how that works?
Dr. Noy.
So yeah, the first step is the mifepristone. And again, this is a progesterone blocker. Without progesterone to support the pregnancy, the fetus simply is not viable. It stops growing. It essentially stops the cells from growing. The second medication, misoprostol, causes uterine contractions. It's both mifepristone and misoprostol are also used to manage miscarriages that are not complete. They're also used to manage non-viable pregnancies that are desired by patients. And misoprostol is also used for labor induction in the obstetrics world. So essentially you have a medication that blocks a pregnancy hormone, and then you have a medication that causes uterine cramping.
Thank you, Dr. Noy. Senator McEwen. I said it right that time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We keep saying that the child is not viable, but why? Does this medication actually starve the child?
Dr. Noy.
So and I'm sorry if I cannot explain this in a way that makes sense, but no, it does not starve the child. It doesn't block blood flow to the uterus. It blocks a hormone that allows a pregnancy to grow. so the pregnancy cannot grow further. It's the exact same medication combination that we would use if a woman came to us with a miscarriage in which her body had not fully passed the tissue. And her body needed help doing that. This is not an uncommon thing.
Thank you, Dr. Noy. As we have more medical providers, if we have more medical questions, committee, I suggest we allow some others to testify. You can ask those questions down the road. Dr. Noy does need to go see patients, I hear. If you got questions for her, that's fine, but if we can hold some of those questions, maybe. So let's go ahead. Thank you, Dr. Noy, for your presentation.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
urge you to vote no. Thank you for your time.
Take care of those Lincoln County patients, would you please?
Oh, we will every day.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next person I see on screen who has a haircut very similar to mine. I can't see your name. I'm looking through 4 layers of plexiglass, but go ahead and introduce yourself, sir. And you're a medical provider. I can tell by your stethoscope. Go ahead and introduce and testify, please.
I am assuming you're speaking to me. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Mr. Chairman.
Glasses and a stethoscope. That's
Right.
you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Dr. Brent Blue. I'm a physician in Jackson. And until recently, I've been the sole provider of pregnancy terminations in Wyoming and Eastern Idaho. Fortunately, now there are other physicians who are providing these terminations. Pregnancy terminations represent less than 10% of my practice, and the economic gain from this service is far outweighed by the protests, the anonymous phone calls, the death threats, and the bobbing we had in 1994. However, my overwhelming desire is to provide unfettered and local access for women's reproductive health, and that outweighs the adversity. Chemical terminations, as you've heard, can be used until about 10 weeks of pregnancy. At that time, there is no fetal cortex formed in the fetus, and there's no pain that's felt, and there's no pain that's present. These medications do not induce starvation. They essentially cause a miscarriage. The fetal size is about the size of a common pea or lima bean, and that's at the latest point. Do not believe the anti-choice rhetoric. It is not true. It is said that this is a cruel procedure. What is cruel is taking this choice away from the women of Wyoming. This legislation is racist, it is sexist, and it puts a thumb on the neck of women in the state of Wyoming. This legislation can induce a cycle of poverty from which many women will never recover in their entire life. This state has always been the stalwart of keeping government out of the lives of people. This legislation inserts government into the very most intimate part of a woman's life. Terminations are never a happy choice. They are always a difficult choice. It should be a safe choice. It should be a choice that women make on their own. Government should not have anything to do with it. When Romania repealed the right to termination, 9,000 women died over the next 23 years because of back alley terminations. In addition, there were a great number of orphan children with significant physical and mental defects. Is this what you want for the women of Wyoming? Is this really what you want? I'm sure each of you who have a daughter may have had, your daughters may have had made a difficult choice like this. This is a choice between a woman, their partner, and their physician. It should not be the choice of the state legislature. I urge you not to pass this bill, and I urge you to keep Wyoming government out of women's health care decisions. Keep Wyoming centered on what it was founded on, equality and independence from government. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Blue, and I invite everybody to take a deep breath. We want to keep this discourse civil. Committee, if you have any questions for Dr. Blue. Senator Bouchard, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I was going to ask some questions, but quite frankly, I'm not going to give anybody who uses the term racist the time of day.
Questions for Dr. Blue, committee? No questions. Thank you, Dr. Blue. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, can I make one point? The reason I said racist is because a large percentage of women who seek terminations are women of color. And that's a nationwide statistic, not just Wyoming. And that's why this bill affects women of color at a greater percentage than Caucasian women.
Okay. Go ahead, Senator Bouchard.
Mr. Chairman, you know, if we're going to keep rattling with this racist comments, I'm going to talk about what we know. And we know that there was a serious infanticide that was racist that was performed early on, and we have audio of it happening where Black children were being aborted, and it was intentional. So if we're going to talk about how it was used, we're going to talk about the other side too. So, I mean, I just don't even want to go here on this bill, but you know, if we're going to do it, I'll start pulling that data up too, and we'll start, I mean, listening to that type of testimony.
Okay, we're all going to take another deep breath. We're not going to go down this road actually, unless somebody can give me an actual study and show me some numbers. Let's take a deep breath. We have a lot of presenters. Senator Hutchins, if you have a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do. And I just want to let Dr. Blue know I'm highly offended by him bringing in race in on this bill. This bill is about abortion patients. I do wish we could have kept to that topic. And in closing, I'd like to just say this as a comment, question, or something to put in your mind, Margaret Sanger. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to go ahead and move on to next. That's our, thank you, Dr. Blue, for presenting. We'll let you get back to patients as well. Thank you very much. Amanda, who do we have next in the waiting room?
Mr. Chairman, I just admitted Ms. Fernandez.
Very good. We're waiting to see her show up on the screen. There she is. Welcome. Welcome to Labor and Health Committee. You have a smile on your face, and we always like that here. Go ahead and introduce yourself and present to the committee, please.
Hello, my name is Ambria Meadows Fernandez, and I also want to inform you that this is my first time giving this type of testimony, and so I'm asking some grace as it relates to respecting titles and delivery.
You are doing very well so far, so take a deep breath and you're going to do great.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, as I've said, I'm Ambria Meadows Fernandez. I'm multi-hyphenate. I'm a writer, a mother, and a student, also a military spouse. And I am reaching out today because I would like to testify against this bill. Thus far, I've heard a lot of different perspectives. And this is an issue, as you stated initially, that is very near and dear to my heart. I actually am glad that it took so long to get to me because I had to have a crying session to kind of get rid of some of that tension. And I want to be one of the first individuals to state that I know for a lot of folks, this conversation centers around individual rights. And personally, for myself, this is a lot more than a matter of individual rights.
Oh, you froze
This
up.
is a concern. And am I still frozen?
No.
Oh, okay. Yes, so for me as an individual, this is actually much larger than individual rights. It is actually my concern about general community well-being. And so I've heard a few of the members of the committee speak about, I think the committee member who introduced the bill and is the author initially said that it's a matter of, do you see this as, basically, are you going to protect life or are you not? And so for myself, this is an oversimplification of the issue, because for me, this is a conversation of, are we protecting potential lives, or are we investing resources to support individuals who are already experiencing life as we know it? And so one of the things that feels really important for me to say is that a lot of times when we have these conversations, we get heavily invested within the pro-life, pro-choice binary, each of which have their own perspectives that they believe are deserving of merit. But I want to point out that there is an alternative that I actually ascribe to, and it's called the Reproductive Justice Framework. And within that reproductive justice framework, the goal is there is an awareness that yes, individuals are going to seek terminations, but there is no legal or external force of control that can prevent that. Pregnancy terminations are as long as the world has existed. And in many moments in history, they have been an active agency. And so I wanted to let y'all know that within the reproductive justice framework, individuals spend more time making sure that there are less barriers, as the physician who spoke initially said, and also understand that the best way to improve community health is to focus on education, access to healthcare, making sure that we have financial barriers that support families as a whole. Because I think too often when we have this conversation, something y'all can't tell at this moment, which is fortunate, is I have 2 children. They're upstairs being distracted by educational TV. And so for a lot of individuals, the choice is not, do I value life or do I not value life? It is instead a conversation of, am I going to prioritize the needs of my existing children over the needs of my potential children? And for me as an individual, if I were to find myself pregnant at this exact moment, as a military spouse, as a graduate student, as a writer who covers reproductive health care and has had 2 life-threatening birth experiences, I don't know if I would make it through. And so in that moment, I know that my family would shift their focus from the concern of a pregnancy towards the concern of the retained placenta I had with both of my pregnancies, as well as the safety and well-being of making sure that my 2 children have a core parent that is here to be able to provide for them. And I think I had some more things, but for now, thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I will pause for questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hernandez. We would have never known you weren't a seasoned testifier. You did very well. Any questions for Mr. Hernandez committee? No questions. You can go be with your children. Thank you very much for coming to committee. We appreciate it. This face I recognize next. Former Representative Halverson with a smile as well. Go ahead, Ms. Halverson.
Good morning, Chairman Baldwin, pardon me, and the Senate Labor Health Committee. I'm Marty Halverson with Wyoming Right to Life, and I urge your aye vote on Senate File 133, prohibiting abortifacients and chemical abortions. The RU 486 protocol, modified in 2016 by the FDA, calls for a woman to abort her baby at home, unattended by medical professionals. In 2018, the FDA reported 24 deaths, over 1,000 hospitalizations, almost 600 blood transfusions, 412 infections, of which 69 were reported as severe. And those are the only events that were reported. The adverse event report system relied upon by the FDA have limitations and typically detect only a small proportion of the events that actually occur. Medical evidence demonstrates that women who use abortion-inducing drugs have a substantially higher risk for complications than those who undergo surgical abortions. Are women in Wyoming receiving comprehensive information about the risks of the RU 486 protocol? The risks of complications increase beyond the FDA's requirement that the protocol be administered under 70 days LMP, last menstrual period. That is 17 weeks, that is 4 months gestation. The doctors that testified previously talked about the FDA says it's safe for under 10 weeks, but the FDA allows these chemical abortions to be performed up to 4 months gestation. Are ultrasounds being performed to accurately age the baby by a qualified healthcare provider prior to dispensing the RU 486 protocol? Are women who request abortion-inducing drugs seeing comprehensive information about the risks? Currently, Wyoming has no informed consent requirements for women seeking to terminate her pregnancy. The risk of complications, including incomplete abortion, are high. Other risks include uterine hemorrhage, viral infections, and pelvic inflammatory disease. The agony the mother goes through that is normal with chemical abortions is nothing we want to see Wyoming women endure. Delivering a potentially 4-month-old baby alone at home is horrific to imagine. This cruel, barbaric, dangerous, gruesome method of terminating a pregnancy has no place in Wyoming. If a woman is determined to seek an abortion by chemicals at a point in her pregnancy and does have to leave the state, we all know there are organizations all over the country that are more than anxious to provide financial help in seeing that this woman secures her termination. Please join the thousands of Wyoming Right to Life members and friends and vote to prohibit this horrible option. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Halverson. Questions, committee for Ms. Halverson? Seeing none, I got to tell you, your little dog is driving me crazy. I keep looking around the room here and I'm looking for a dog and I can't see one. So it's got to be in your end.
And he's locked up.
And that's why he's barking.
Right.
Thank you very much, Ms. Halverson, for testifying.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next testimony. And I apologize, ma'am. I can't see your name. If you raise your hand, you'll know it's you that I'm talking to. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead and introduce yourself and testify, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dr. Renee Hinkle. I am an OBGYN physician in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I've been a licensed physician here in the state for 22 years. And I do not do abortions, but I am an OBGYN provider. I am testifying against this bill. I have to agree with the testimony of both Dr. Noyes and Dr. Blue in many ways on how they described this procedure and how it works, as well as their opposition to this bill. I do have a couple of statements to make about some of the previous testimony, and then I will say some things as well. What Ms. Halverson just said is not 100% accurate, but I want to say that this medication is not used in the state of Wyoming after 10 weeks. The American Board of OBGYN basically recommends that this medication not be used for elective abortions after that period of time. Late-term abortions in Wyoming are already illegal. So those, inflammatory statements that she made as far as 4-month pregnancies and things like that, that is just to make this a little bit more emotionally driven, I think. But that is not what is being done in the state of Wyoming. So if we're talking about Wyoming, if we're talking about what we're doing here in the state, let's talk about that. Also, the travel question that was brought up earlier, the reason that people have to travel out of the state to get this medication if they decide to do an abortion, and this is illegal here, is that a physician-patient relationship has to be established. That's part of how we practice medicine. And so as a provider, I cannot give a medication to a patient that I don't have an established relationship with. And so in order to decrease any of the risks that Ms. Halverson was talking about, as far as risks from the procedure itself, there must be a physician-patient relationship established. If we want to talk about those complications, the complications of people doing illegal abortions is going to be much higher than the complications that people are having from doing a legal medical medical abortion. Physical surgical procedures are much more risky for an abortion, for an elective abortion, than they would be for a medical termination. There's multiple studies in the literature, the medical literature, that state that. So that is one of the reasons that medical abortions are recommended when an early abortion can be done. I also want to state that the main problem I have with this bill is not really the right to life versus pro-choice. I think none of us are pro-abortion. I think we've talked about that in the past. But we just believe that there should be a choice for women, as Dr. Noyes mentioned earlier. She did a very good job of explaining that. But my concern is, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to get any of the senators who are pro-life, any of the people who have sponsored this bill, to not believe that pro-life is their belief system, obviously. My problem with this bill truly is the fact that you're taking medications that are used for other purposes and making them illegal. It's going to be very difficult for anyone in the state, anyone anywhere, to be able to tell why a person is prescribing this medication. I use these medications for miscarriages. Part of the problem with the way these bills are all worded is that if somebody is pregnant and has a miscarriage, if that baby becomes non-viable, which is what we call it when a baby no longer has a heartbeat and is no longer growing and is no longer able to grow, we call that non-viable. When a patient is pregnant and has a non-viable fetus, we call that an abortion. Whether that is a natural abortion, whether that is an elective abortion, it's still always called an abortion. And so it's going to be difficult for me as a physician who, I don't do elective abortions. I have chosen not to do that. It's going to be difficult for me to do an abortion to help a patient to pass tissue that is no longer viable in someone who has a natural miscarriage, as you guys call it. It's going to be difficult for me to get those medications, even though that is a legal procedure. And so by making these particular medications illegal for abortion, that's going to make it difficult for me to do my job. We see miscarriages every single day in our office. Every single day, miscarriages occur. In the medical term, that is called an abortion. And so it's going to make our job very difficult to do something that is legal. That's going to put us at risk for a possible $10,000 fine and or 14 years in prison. How are we going to get OBGYN physicians and other physicians, family practice physicians who do deliveries to come to the state if they're not able to do a large portion of their job without the possibility of somebody saying, oh, she did an abortion? So I think that is really putting physicians at a huge disadvantage. I'm not going to be able to do my job as well. Physical, surgical procedures to do a DNC, a dilation and curettage, which is what we do on somebody who has a miscarriage or an abortion, if we're doing it surgically, have higher risks. There are risks of infection, there are higher risks of injury to the uterus, there's higher risk of inability to get pregnant in a later time. There's multiple complications. There's complications with anesthesia. There's increased costs. There are multiple disadvantages to doing a miscarriage or an abortion, as we call it, physically with a surgical procedure. And so we also use, especially misoprostol, we use that every single day to help induce labor for a term pregnant person who are trying to get delivered. And so it's, if we make this illegal for one thing, it's going to be much more difficult, probably much more expensive for us to get those medications for the other things we use them for. again, I know I'm not going to be able to change anyone's mind as far as pro-life or pro-choice, but I believe that this bill is a very inefficient and highly dangerous way to do the decrease in the abortions that it's supposed to help with. The other problem I have with the bill itself is the term pregnant, because it says, the basic term means any condition of a woman who has a human embryo or fetus within her as a result of conception. That means I can't use this on a miscarriage patient because she is pregnant and there typically is an embryo and or pregnancy tissue in her uterus. We wouldn't be able to do our job. You're basically legislating against physicians being able to do something that we do on a daily basis. So I think the bill is flawed. I have no problem with people being pro-life and wanting to decrease the number of abortions. My particular stance would be that we increase contraception, that we increase education, and that we increase patients' ability to get good medical care. And so with that, Chairman, I would be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hinkle. Committee questions for Dr. Hinkle? Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, you did point out a couple things where this bill's flawed. If the language were changed to the abortion of a viable child, would you then support it, or can you see the intent behind it? Thank you.
Dr. Hinkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator McEwen. I would not support it. Again, I am a pro-choice person, and so I cannot support a bill to this length that it would truly get rid of over 90%, if not 95% of abortions done in the state. So I would not support it. It would be a better bill, however, if that was the case, if it said a viable pregnancy, because if you say pregnant, then that's going to make what I do on a daily basis illegal. My other main objection, just to follow up on that, is the making of the production. What does it say? It says manufacture, distribute, prescribe, dispense, sell, transfer. When you're talking about this medication, we as physicians don't do any of the things except prescribe. And so, you're also going to make the manufacturing of this medication illegal. That's going to make getting these medications much more difficult. And there are people who aren't going to be willing to sell it to anybody in Wyoming. And again, we use these medications on a daily basis for things that are not elective abortions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hinkle. Further questions? Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr.
Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hinkle, I think on page 2, lines 4, it says the prohibition shall not apply to the list below. So I think your objection or thoughts about that may be incorrect. So if you would read lines 4 through 14 on page 2 again, I think that'll clear that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hutchings, Senator Hutchings, I'm sorry. I did read that, and I do understand that. However, you can understand that there would still be some hesitation, number one, from a physician who is using this medication to, for the felony charge of 14 years and $10,000 in jail. There will be some hesitation on how to use it, because who's going to police this? Who's going to say whether or not somebody is using that medication for an elective abortion versus somebody who's using that medication for a miscarriage versus somebody who's using that medication for induction of labor? So there will be, if this becomes law, there will be difficulty in getting that medication. And again, it will be much more expensive, many of these procedures we do are on Medicaid patients. So the state will inevitably have to pay that as well. So this bill affects many more things in the medical community and in the financial community than just getting rid of these medications for abortion. As I said, I'm not going to change your mind. I know many of you are pro-life and feel very strongly about that. I just think there's a better way to do that than this bill.
Thank you, Dr. Hinkle. Further questions? Thank you for presenting today, Dr. Hinkle. We appreciate you locking Dr. George out of the room so he doesn't interfere this morning.
Thank you.
Amanda, do we have further testimony online? I would remind those who are going to testify, we're down to about 25 minutes of testimony. So if we can keep it kind of brief, and so everybody that wants to testify can get in, we'd appreciate it. I see another smiling face on screen. There it is, the smile. Go ahead, ma'am. Introduce yourself and testify, please.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good morning, and thank you for having me today. My name is Ruby Novogrodsky. I am a Wyoming voter here in Senate District 10 in Albany County, and I am here today to urge you to vote no on Senate File 133. As a matter of principle, I think that it is wrong for the government to infringe on the patient-provider relationship in this way. But as the previous doctor stated, I know I'm not going to change your minds on this particular issue. So here is what I will say. The Wyoming State Constitution dictates in Article 1, Section 38, subsection A, that every competent adult shall have the right to make his or her own medical decisions. And I think that it is demeaning and irresponsible for the equality state to legislate on this issue, because it would put into law that women are not always accounted for as competent adults. That's the first thing. But also, as so many of the doctors on this call have mentioned, these drugs, especially misoprostol, are used outside of abortions. Misoprostol is also used to stop postpartum hemorrhaging after a safe childbirth. And especially in a rural state where so many people may not have access to more extensive or complicated treatments, I think it is dangerous to restrict access to a potentially life-saving drug like the previous doctors have mentioned. And obviously I defer to their medical expertise on this issue, but that is very concerning to me, especially since we see every day that when there are serious medical conditions in the state, people are so often have to be rushed outside of the state to Colorado or to Idaho or Montana. And it is deeply concerning to me that you would restrict access to a drug that would help so many women and mothers specifically in a much simpler way that would allow them to stay where they are instead of having to travel out of the state. So I really hope that you will take my voice into account, and thank you very much for your time, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you for taking time to present. Questions, committee? No questions, you're free. Thank you for coming to the committee today and testifying. We
Thank you, Mr.
like
Chairman.
this movement to allow more people to testify. Thank you very much, Amanda. Go ahead and let somebody else in. How many more do we have in the waiting room, Amanda?
Let in the last person with their hand raised. So if there's any others wanting to testify, we can ask them to raise their hand, Mr. Chairman. Oh, we just got 5 more.
Okay, well, we got about 20 minutes, so we're going to limit them to about 4 minutes each, so we have time to discuss the bill and make a vote. Go ahead and let a couple in.
Mr. Chairman, we have Shannon Mudry, Miss Wendy Volk, and Miss Jerry Johnson.
Very good. I don't see any of them showing up yet, so the first one to show up is going to be the first one to speak. And there's a smiling face camera just came on. You know who you are. Go ahead, ma'am, introduce yourself and speak to the committee. You're muted, however, and we're not good at reading lips through plexiglass, so Very-
Thank you so much, Chairman. I didn't realize I had to actually do a little on my end to get my video to show up. So I thank you so much. I don't know if I can do this in 4 minutes, but I will do my best. My name is Shannon Mudry, and I want to thank all of you. I hope that each one of you had received my email last night in support of this bill. And I'm here to testify today to tell you that I've heard a lot about women in Wyoming. But I'm not quite sure how many live in Wyoming or grow up. So I think it's really important for you to know that I have been a citizen, a tax-paying citizen in the state of Wyoming since 1995. And my husband and I have raised 2 beautiful children, who one is also ready to have his own child. So I am a grandmother with a grandbaby in the womb. So I just want you to know that that is an important fact. I live in Gillette, Wyoming, so we appreciate Bill Fortner's support of this bill, especially since I'm a Campbell County resident. And again, we've heard a lot of talk about women's rights. And so I can't in 4 minutes even go past the notes, because everybody who's testified against the bill had more time than 4 minutes. So you can cut me off when you need to, but I will do my best to just start with some facts, not feelings, on what's happening here today and what this issue is. And it goes first to speaking of women's rights. And you are here today to represent the Wyoming Constitution. And someone that just testified before me had commented on that. And I think that's great. I never read it like from beginning to end, but I can tell you about the United States Constitution, which we're all under. So I imagine it's not much different. And that we all have the inalienable right to life. So today we're not here to talk about those definitions, because we all know what they are. Science is on our side. Life is a baby in the womb, from natural conception, and we still are a life on this earth under the Constitution, Wyoming and the United States one, till natural death. So it's really important that I stated that, because I think you can get caught up in all the testimony today. And with all due respect, I heard everything, and I do, if I don't get cut off and can get to the rest of my what I'd like to share, I do want to go back to one individual's testimony, if she's still on. And I believe, and I'm sorry if I skew your name, but was it Ambria Meadows Fernandez? And I just wanted to state that that was worthy of, I appreciate, and it's really hard to do this. I as well have never testified on behalf of any bill. This is weird, and it's somewhat scary. So I loved how you started out, give me some grace. I need that as well today too. So I think it's important enough that we listen to each other's sides. And at the end of the day, we voted for the individuals who are going to vote on this bill today to represent us. And I feel very confident, being a citizen in Wyoming for as long as I have, that they'll recognize what this bill is really for. And it's supporting life, not getting caught in terminology of miscarriage versus abortion. So back to Miss Ambria, I just want to say I'm sorry for your, I made a note here that you talked about you had some difficult pregnancies and some life-threatening. And I just want to say I'm sorry for that, because that is real. We as women it's not easy to go through the process, whether it's by choice or not choice, that you've got pregnant. And what we're getting mixed up here, and I appreciate the people who I believe understand the bill, are going to get past that. I mean, that's an issue, and we all have a horrific story, challenging stories about being women. I do not believe that I am losing any rights as a woman when I live in a beautiful state that recognizes this isn't about me right now. This is about the baby in the womb. And it's not a fetus. Science doesn't call it a fetus. People who choose to try to desensitize human life might. But my baby, my grandbaby, who's going to be born in May, is alive right now. And we are so excited to greet her on the other side of the womb. And that's a good scenario. But I understand that, Ambria, you may have had some others, and I'm not sure, like, because since you didn't testify to where, are you from Wyoming, or even if that matters today. The reason why I think it matters is because I wanted to identify myself as a tax-paying citizen in Wyoming, and I'm just shocked at Dr. Blue's comment that 95% of women after 10 years are okay, and they would still go and have an abortion again. I guess I have no idea where that statistic comes from, and I just don't believe it.
Okay,
So
I apologize, but we need to keep moving or else the committee's not going to be able to work the bill.
Okay,
I think we all caught the gist, and you did a great job, by the way, for your first testimony. You did very well. I think the committee would agree with that. We hear a lot worse. We hear some better, but
well, if I had more time, as much time as the pro-choicers had, I think I could even support the bill more. But I do want to leave you, Mr. Chair, with the one point that I hope you've all watched the movie Unplanned. It's probably the best testimony that anyone has seen in the United States to the truth of chemical abortions. So I do ask, Mr. Chairman, and all the people that are there today to not vote by emotions of what was said today, but by facts. And I appreciate your support of the bill because the child in the womb is a woman. So if we're supporting women's rights, let's support the most vulnerable woman in this discussion today, and that would be the one in the womb. So thank you very much for your time.
And I would advise you, if this bill goes through and moves on, you will have another chance to testify. If this goes across the hall to the House, sign up early, sign up quick, and you'll be able to testify earlier. So
thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
I see another face not smiling yet. If she'll, there it is. Okay, go ahead and testify after you introduce yourself, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to testify. My name is Wendy Volk. I live here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I was proud to see all of the people from Wyoming. I know for a fact live here in Wyoming. I've met them and they live here in our great state of Wyoming. I am speaking in opposition of this bill. It is a known fact that 45% of women can't make their own decisions about their sexual and reproductive health. This type of proposed restriction makes abortion inaccessible for Wyoming patients, particularly when patients face multiple restrictions that together create logistical, legal, and financial barriers to care. Individually and together, abortion restrictions violate the U.S. Supreme Court's undue burden standard that prohibits states like Wyoming from enforcing restrictions that place an obstacle in the way of a patient needing an abortion. We must all speak up for women's bodily autonomy. I request that you consider the testimony and please turn down this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that testimony. Questions? No hands up. Let's have someone else in the room. Thank you very much. Smile more. You need to smile. It looks better. Thank you. How many have we got left out there, Amanda?
Mr. Chairman, there's 2 right now in the room, Ms.
We will.
Johnson and Ms. Saucedo. And then we have 4 more in the waiting room.
Those 2, actually. Those 2 will probably round us off so we have time to work the bill.
If they just turn on their video, they're ready to go.
Okay. And they better be smiling when they show up. Oh, there's one. She's not smiling yet. She's adjusting her camera. She doesn't have to smile.
Yeah,
I
I'm ready
can't
to
see
speak.
your name, ma'am. I'm looking through plexiglass and I can't see your name. I apologize. Go ahead and testify.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here today to share my thoughts on Senate File 011133. My name is Ileana and I'm currently a resident in Albany County and I have lived in Wyoming my whole entire life, Goshen County. I would also like to address Shannon Moudry that Ambria is from Wyoming, if you're still watching. But I take pride in the freedom that Wyoming grants its citizens. It's a promise of freedom that has long been defended for decades now, and in recent years has been defended by this legislator by voting no on similar legislation of bills such as this. I oppose this bill because I believe that if it were to pass, this bill would greatly deter and significantly alter the unique freedoms and liberties that Wyoming guarantees its people. I just ask, I know I'm short on time, so I ask you to please ensure my freedoms are protected today, and please don't know on supporting this, supporting government hands in my life, when what I do with my reproductive health and also other life and liberties of Wyoming citizens. Again, thank you for your time today.
Eliana, we appreciate that testimony. Thank you for coming to the committee. Any questions, committee? No questions. Thank you very much, Eliana, again for coming and testifying. And our final testimony will be from a smiling face, no doubt.
Be Ms. Johnson, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Johnson.
If she can just turn on her video and unmute herself, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Johnson, if you can activate your video and unmute yourself. I'm trying to be very quiet because I really don't like that camera to alternate to me. Ms. Johnson, if you can hear us, unmute yourself and turn your video on if you would. This is a silence we've grown accustomed to in Zoom.
Mr. Chairman, she's unmuted herself, but still no video.
Ms. Johnson, if you can hear us, go ahead. Even if we don't see your video, go ahead and speak if you can hear us. I think while we wait and see if Ms. Johnson can get on, let's have Senator Salazar come back up in the seat of honor, please. I think we'll go ahead and proceed with the wrap up. If Ms. Johnson appears, we'll interrupt and get back through to her. But Senator Salazar, if you would like to bring us home.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. You know, I know all of you here. You know the issues. You've seen the bill. You know specifically the prohibitions that we're aiming at with these two specific drugs, and what we are not outlawing. I'll leave it to you, Mr. Chairman, and the good members to decide for yourselves. I think you are aware of the issues, what the bill does, what the bill does not do, and I'll leave it to your good office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Salazar. Absent Ms. Johnson, we'll go ahead and close to public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure? Senator Hutchins moved the bill. Committee comments on the bill, comments on any amendments, any comments at all, please step right up. Raise your hand though, so I know you want to talk. I got a comment. So if nobody else wants to comment, I want to comment quickly. And my comment quickly is, and I would explain to the public and to the committee that my vote in no way reflects on my pro-life philosophy. My negative vote will be simply for this reason, and that is I believe, as we heard at least one testimony, these drugs are commonly used. And I think there's some danger in here for some unintended consequence, and that would be and where it says on the page 2, where it says a woman upon whom an abortion is performed, and then further we go to define what that pregnancy means. She has a human embryo or fetus within her. My feeling in the way that I read this is that I think this applies to the spontaneous abortion. I believe it applies to that incomplete abortion. And this is a case where we would outlaw a procedure that does happen frequently in an OBGYN office. And I think we would handicap them and tie their hands behind their back significantly. to the point of, the threat of a 14 years in jail or a $10,000 fine is pretty significant. And this would significantly impair the health of that person that truly needs this drug, truly needs this to be done. And for that reason, I think that's an important flaw in the bill. And that is the sole reason that I'm voting no. Right now, abortion by any means is illegal in the state before 10 weeks. And one of the effects of this bill is it takes that back to 4 weeks, essentially. And that's a policy decision. And that's neither here nor there. But this part of not being able to use the drug for this other use, which I believe is included in this bill, I think is detrimental to the bill. The other thing that came to my mind was when these manufacturers of these drugs, when there's this threat of a huge fine and a huge prison term potentially, even though it's unintended, some of those drugs may be withdrawn from the market. And I bring the example of in death penalties. One of the drugs that was used in performing the death penalty and in doing that was pulled from the market. And it became a very big issue for those states that did do the death penalty, that did do those executions. They couldn't get the drug. So while it was perhaps a good unintended consequence, nonetheless, it was an unintended consequence. And I fear that on this as well with these drugs, the manufacturers may pull back on the manufacturer, may pull back on the availability. Those are my sole reasons for voting against this. I am pro-life. My email will not reflect that immediately when this vote is turned in. But I appreciate the bringers. I appreciate the civility I think we did very well today. And in general, this committee does very well, and I'm pretty proud of that. If there's no further comments, questions, Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your comments. And as you made them, I was wondering, is there anything you can offer as an amendment that would help this bill move forward? I'm sure the good bringer of the bills has had some thoughts on that as we sit here. I too like the bill, or I should say, I too am pro-life, and I too have some questions about page 2, lines 15 through 19, the severity of the penalty. But I think all that can be changed. And then I think some of the other information on page 1, lines 14, where it says, notwithstanding any other provisions of the law, no person shall manufacture, distribute, or prescribe that particular drug. I think that's something that with a little time we can work on, and if not, then the body as a whole will deal with that. But I will be a yes vote because I think there's something that we can do to make this a good bill. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I had a question in there for you. Was there anything you thought of that we could do to amend it?
Senator Hutchins, and the only amendment I can think of, and I believe that was discussed, I think Senator McEwen brought that up, and I'm looking for a place where it fit. And I would honestly have to study. It would probably better run as a committee of the whole amendment.
Thank you, sir.
And that would be out there on line 7 or 8, where we could somehow put a viable, or an abortion is performed in a viable fetus, or something to that effect. I would have to think about that, and I would invite others in the committee to think that out too. If you get any ideas, bring them up, and perhaps we can do an amendment down the road, which I believe would improve this and take away some of those unintended consequences. But it's probably a deep subject today, and not something I'm prepared to do right now. Certainly, I've got a few things on my mind. Other comments or suggestions, committee? If not, I would call. Oh, go ahead, Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also am concerned about the section on page 215 to 19. To have it a felony to any physician who violates this subsection, and there may be instances where there is a need. So I'm concerned about that. I'm not ready to prepare an amendment at this point, but I think if the bill goes forward, that's something we should get input from some legal minds on that. The fine of $10,000 doesn't concern me as much as you don't want to physician to have a felony and not be able to maintain them malpractice insurance, et cetera. I'm concerned about that. I would also like to, as was mentioned, incorporate the term viable fetus, because in the event of a miscarriage, a doctor shouldn't be penalized under this. So I think we need some work on this bill, but obviously I'm pro-life, and I think it's worth passing at this point and then amending if it does pass. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Furphy. And I would actually encourage the committee members, two things I would encourage. Number one is when this bill comes to the floor, that you speak with some people, speak with legal minds, speak with whomever, with the sponsor of the bill, and see if we can come up with some committee of the whole amendments that would be applicable. Number two is you hit a key point, and I think we're not going to solve it in this session, and that is down the road, somewhere we need to distinguish in the statutes between miscarriage or spontaneous abortion and abortion, because that's a discongruency between medicine and statute and law, frankly. And I think that's something that, I don't know that we can fix it, but I think it's something to think about and something I sure would like fixed, because I think that would solve a lot of these discussions down the road. With that in mind, let's go ahead and vote. Mike, if you would, please.
Senators, this is for Senate File 133. Senator Bouchard. Aye. Senator Furphy. Aye. Senator Hutchins.
Aye.
Senator McCune.
Aye.
Chairman Baldwin. No. That's 4 noes and 1.
Ayes.
Forgive me, 4 ayes and 1 no. I'm sorry.